Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtota Shatashi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtota Shatashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the sum of devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to the sum of devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to the sum of devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 7, Text number 3. Kridayam Udyamaha Ardhasya Kamaha Chikridisha Anyataha Svatatriptasya Cha Katam Nivritasya Sada Anyataha Kridayamudyamorbhasya Kamashchikridishanyataha Svatastriptasya cha katam Nivritasya sadanyataha Kridayamudyamorbhasya Kamashchikridishanyataha Svatastriptasya cha katam Nivritasya sadanyataha Kridayamudyamorbhasya Kamashchikridishanyataha Svatastriptasya cha katam Nivritasya sadanyataha. Did you repeat? Kridayamudyamorbhasya Kamashchikridishanyataha Svatastriptasya cha katam Nivritasya sadanyataha. Ataji? Kridaya mudyamor bhasya kamashikri dishanyataha svatastriptasya chakatam nivritasya siddhanyataha. Kridayam, in the matter of playing. Udyamaha, enthusiasm. Arabhasya, of the boys. Kamaha, desire. Shikridisha, willingness to play. Anyataha, with other boys. Svatatriptasya, for one who is self-satisfied. Cha, also. Katam, what for? Nivritasya, one who is detached. Sada, at all times. Anyataha, otherwise. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Boys are enthusiastic to play with other boys or with various diversions because they are encouraged by desire. But there's no possibility of such desire for the Lord because He is self-satisfied and detached from everything at all times. Purport. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one without a second, there's no possibility that anything besides Him can exist. He expands Himself by His energies in multi-forms of self-expansions and separated expansions as well, just as fire expands itself by heat and light. Since there is no other existence besides the Lord Himself, the Lord's association with anything manifests His association with Himself. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Maya tatamidam sarvam jagat avyakta mortina matstani sarva bhutani nachaham teshvavastitaha. The complete manifestation of the cosmic situation is an expansion of the Lord Himself in His impersonal feature. All things are situated in Him only, yet He is not in them. And that is the opulence of the Lord's attachment and detachment. He is attached to everything, yet He is detached from all. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tesmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupakata Mayam Tadati Swapadantigam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganantam Vitam Tam Jivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivashakan Vitamshta. He Krishna Kuruna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishwari Vrishabhanuste Devi Pranama Mahire Pre Vanchakapatu Vyasha Kripasandu Bivacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namahan Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishta Putarish Mate Bhakti Vikasa Swamin Itinamane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishta Putarish Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Itinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prasharane Nirvishesha Shrunivadi Pashtyatya Dishatarane. Okay, so before I go on to the verse, today is supposedly Bhismāstami, but so this day, Bhismāstami, if you look it up online, there's not many sources regarding it. It wasn't observed during Srila Prabhupada's time. It's not in the calendars of any of the Gaudiya Maths. They don't observe it. As well, if you look it up online, the ISKCON sources mainly, which deal with it online, report it variously. There's a Wikipedia article that says it's his disappearance day. Some ISKCON websites say it's his appearance day. Others list it as his disappearance day. But if you take it as the day that he left his body, it doesn't match with what's there in Shastra. If you take the account of the Bhagavatam, this is Canto 1:9, verse 29. Dharmam pravadatas tasya sakala pratyupastitaha yoginas chandra mrityor vanshitas tutarayanaha. So specifically this utarayanaha, there you go. This utarayanaha, the period when the sun runs on the northern horizon. This may get a little like technical, but I'll try to make it like simplistic. When Bhismadev was describing occupational duty, so Bhismadev was lying there. He was struck down in the battle, during the battle of Kurukshetra, but he didn't die. He was lying on a bed of arrows, and even after the battle ended, the Pandavas came back, headed by Yudhishthira chiefly, and Bhismadev was still lying there amongst all the other warriors there, although he was set to the side, sort of. So Bhismadev instructed Yudhishthira, giving him more instructions for, I think it said 50 days, something like that in the Mahabharata, if I remember right. So that's there in the Mahabharata, is recorded there. And then he left his body. So when he left his body, so Bhismadev was speaking these instructions to Yudhishthira Maharaj. This is also in brief in the Bhagavatam. The sun's course ran into the northern hemisphere. This period is desired by mystics who die at their will. This is described in the Bhagavad Gita as Uttarayanaha period. So Uttarayana, this period is basically the solstice, you can take it as. According to the Vedic system, the calendar, the solstice for this year, 2025, if you take it like that, was January 14th, what they call some parts of India, Makar Sankranti. Yeah. So then the Bhagavatam says, tada, at that time. At that time, when the sun ran into its northern course, then what happened? Thereupon that man who spoke on different subjects with thousands of meanings, and who fought on thousands of battlefields and protected thousands of men, stopped speaking, and being completely free from all bondage, withdrew his mind from everything else and fixed his wide-open eyes upon the original personality of God, Sri Krishna, who stood before him four-handed, dressed in yellow garments that glittered and shined. This is one of my favorite verses. But it says immediately when the sun's course ran into it, if you take how Srila Prabhupada is translating here, and then it goes on like this. He was looking at Krishna. He was free from all inauspiciousness. He was free from external activities. He stopped, and then he offered his prayers. And for those of us who have read, which I think is most of us, he left his body after he offered those prayers. So it seems quite clear here that Uttarayana period came, and then immediately, tada, at that time, he left his body. If you say, well, the Mahabharata may say something else, well, I looked at the Mahabharata, and it says this. The Sanskrit is there for those who can so read it, but this translation is, O Yudhishthira, in my experience with this Mahabharata, Gokul Chandra Prabhu read this translation, and it's quite accurate from what I've seen. It's like a very literal translation. O Yudhishthira, the lunar month of Magh, we're in the month of Magh. The month of Magh has been going on now. Well, anyway, the lunar month of Magh has come. This is, again, the lighted fortnight, and the fourth part of it, odd by this, according to my calculations, is over. So if you look, it seems like slightly off, the calculation, in other words, because it's now 22 days after the month of Magh is started, and if you take here, the lighted fortnight, and the fourth part of it ought to be over by this according to my calculations. It doesn't seem to quite line up because it should have been earlier in the month rather than later in the month.
No.
Is it not?
No, because we're right now in Shukla Paksha.
It is?
Yeah. This says Pakshayam Shuklo. So Pakshoyam Shuklo says in Sanskrit. So Shukla refers to Gaura Paksha, which we are in right now. See, the month of Magh began at Shankaranti. But it's inauspicious, according to Bhagavad Gita, to pass away during the dark fortnight. So you have to go through the light
I see, okay.
Which is this 15 days. So in that case, at that time would refer to this time period, not the exact moment.
Okay.
So, in fact, technical calculations is like this, that yesterday is Ratha Saptami, and today is Bhismāstami. Ratha Saptami is the day when the course of the chariot of the sun actually turns north. So what happens at Shankaranti, the sun stops moving south.
The first canto.
And then there's a period where the sun, it's now summer solstice, but the sun hasn't technically started moving north yet. That moving north happened yesterday.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
And then today is Bhismāstami, which is also the bright fortnight. And then fourth part might be the fact that the fortnight itself is divided into 4. So 16 days, 4 days each.
Well, based
something
upon
like
that, yeah, that's a good point. As I was reading that, that's a good point. The lighted fortnight, I didn't consider that. Then it very well may be his disappearance day then. So we'll speak on Bhismadev then, because it seems accurate according to the Mahabharata. If you take the Bhagavatam, it seems like immediately, but according to Mahabharata, it seems to apply something, it seems accurate, in other words. So anyway, I'm enthused because I like Bhismadev, his prayers. I remember when I first read the Bhagavatam, this was a section that really stood out to me. And somehow or other, I remember much of these verses, specifically his prayers. Could you work this, Mason? You can just follow me. I'll go through his prayers some. So anyway, I'll just give some backstory. Bhishma, he is the son of both Ganga and Shantanu Maharaj. He was known by many different names. Bhishma Devavrata as well before. He's renowned for the vow he took, the vow of celibacy. I won't go into great history regarding him. I'm mainly going to speak about his disappearance. Anyway, we'll just pick up from this verse I left off, text 30. So I was just speaking that, Prabhupada quotes from the Gita translation here. So anyway, yeah, he had spoken on many different religious topics, and at the end of his life, well, first, he had lived such a very extensive life, actually. It's a very beautiful verse, this verse. He spoke on thousands of different subjects because he had just spoken on it, but also he fought on thousands of battlefields, not only this Kurukshetra, on thousands of others, protected thousands of men, and all these activities he was engaged in at this time, right shortly before leaving his body. He withdrew his senses, and he concentrated his mind upon Krishna. You can go to text 32. Yeah, Shri Bhishma Uvacha. I won't go through the Sanskrit, although it's very nice. Gurmar says these are some of the prayers that we can learn in the Bhagavatam. Bhishma Dev's prayers. I don't know them. I know the English quite well. He says the English, let me now invest my thinking, feeling, and willing, which were so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties, in the all-powerful Lord Sri Krishna. He is always self-satisfied, but sometimes, being the leader of the devotees, he enjoys transcendental pleasure by descending on the material world. Although from him only the material world is created. So it's very, very nice. He's setting a very perfect example. He had done so many things throughout his life. He spoke on so many different things. He had just finished speaking on dharma, which constitutes different topics, not necessarily always transcendental. If you look at the Mahabharata, it means he was speaking on things like charity, how to properly give in charity, the caste divisions and the respective roles, specifically the occupational duties of a king, things like this, worldly dharma, you can say in one sense. So which is necessary, but at this time, and he had a boon that he could choose when to leave his body. So he wasn't being forced to leave his body. He specifically chose at this time to leave his body. Why? Because this auspicious period came about, this Uttarayana period. So he's now so desiring to leave his body. Why now? Because the Pandavas have come with Krishna, and Krishna is standing directly before him. And said in the previous verse, he's looking at Krishna. Also in the Mahabharata, the same thing comes about. The same account is there in the Mahabharata. So he's invested his mind, his thinking, feeling, and willing, which were so long engaged in different subjects. So long as we're in this material world, necessarily, our mind is engaged in so many different subjects. Not just mind, everything. Thinking, feeling, and willing is engaged in so many different things, even on a day-to-day basis, even within the Krishna consciousness movement. You see, for example, Srila Prabhupada, he was engaged in doing so many things for Krishna, spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, going to the bank, seeing the trial balance, etc. like this. Worldly things which could be taken, ultimately connected with Krishna's service, true. But at the end of his life, he made a concentrated effort to, he was thinking to go to the West and preach, actually. He made an excursion to London when he was in incredibly poor health. And then it was quite evident to him that he was going to leave his body. So he went to Vrindavan, and he spent his last days still translating the Bhagavatam, obviously, and he was hearing Bhagavatam and also chanting. And when unable to do so, you see recordings, and there are recordings. If you hear the lectures or conversations during that time, you hear, for example, Prabhu chanting the verses. The verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam's 10th canto to Srila Prabhupada. It's very beautiful, actually. And then you hear his disciples. Srila Prabhupada, he wanted his disciples he wanted specifically to be free from management, actually. He didn't want, he was wanting that for some time, but it was practically being enforced at this point. So he just wanted to hear Krishna's holy name. That was quoted in some previous class. He said that the real medicine is Bhava Shaudi. This real medicine is Krishna's name. So at the end of his life, following the example of Bhishma, Srila Prabhupada said, I want to be like Bhishma and die on the battlefield. And he did the same thing. At the end of his life, Bhishma, he died on the battlefield, but he withdrew all his faculties and just invested them in Krishna. So similarly to Srila Prabhupada. So we see this is an example to be followed. In other words, we're engaged in so many activities through our life in the Krishna consciousness movement, as we should be, as is necessary. And then at the end, for the final exam, you could say, we should invest 100% all of our faculties within pure meditation upon Krishna, which doesn't come easy. It's something that has to be practiced rather than something that just immediately comes about, as Prabhupada will often make the point. It's just like when you take an exam, at least sane people, they study beforehand. Otherwise, you'll fail it because you'll have no idea what's going on. So similarly, too, this life is a preparation for the examination of death. And our ability to concentrate upon Krishna comes from our sadhana and the mercy we receive in this lifetime. Ultimately, your mercy. So Bhishma Deva received this mercy. And we see, I'll just continue his prayers. He's looking at Krishna. His eyes are fixed upon Krishna. And he's recounting various different things, Krishna, different pastimes, both he was involved with, and that he heard about. He says, Krishna is the intimate friend of Arjuna. He has appeared on this earth in his transcendental body, which resembles the bluish color of the tamal tree. His body attracts everyone in the three planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower. May his glittering yellow dress and his lotus face, covered with paintings of sandalwood pulp, be the object of my attraction, and may I not desire fruitive results. It's a very personalistic system, Krishna consciousness. Krishna is a person. Everything's personalistic. You can see, even at the time of his leaving his body, all these details are coming to Bhishma Dev's mind. How Krishna's face is painted with, it's quite, the painting specifically of sandalwood pulp. Presumably at that time, I know could not be. Krishna was in royal dress at that time. I don't imagine that he may have paintings on his face. Could be, but specifically when he was in Vrindavan, and acting casually, you could say it may be so. So anyway, he's remembering these various details. And then the next verse we have, on the battlefield, where Sri Krishna attended Arjuna out of friendship, the flowing hair of Lord Krishna turned ashen due to the dust raised by the hoofs of the horses. And because of his labor, beads of sweat wetted his face. All these decorations, intensified by the wounds dealt by my sharp arrows, were enjoyed by him. Let my mind thus go unto Sri Krishna. So Bhishma Dev is remembering shooting Krishna. he had fought with Krishna and shot Krishna with arrows on the battlefield. And Krishna enjoyed that. He enjoyed those arrows. It's very amazing. Typically, we don't enjoy somebody piercing us with arrows. But it's said in the purport here, I believe, that the arrows shot by Bhishma Dev were as pleasing as the kisses of the gopis or something like that.
The worship of a devotee who throws soft roses on it.
Yeah, the worship of the devotees who throws soft roses. So it was equally pleasing to the Lord. And you see, it's very, very, these prayers are especially nice because all these details that are coming to Bhishma, his mind is not overwhelmed. It takes a very clear state of mind to remember a detail in general, to remember To remember this amount of detail even on a day-to-day basis, it requires some clarity of mind. What does speak of that time when you're leaving your body, when his senses are withdrawn from external objects? This is a significant point. His senses were in mind, and everything were withdrawn from external objects, but he's remembering these accounts that took place between himself and Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, which means they weren't external objects of the senses. It was a direct involvement with Krishna's pastimes, interaction with his pleasure potency. So it's transcendental, in other words. The next verse, we see, in obedience to the command of his friend, Lord Sri Krishna entered the arena of the battlefield of Kurukshetra between the soldiers of Arjuna and Duryodhana. And while there, he shortened the lifespans of the opposite party by his merciful glance. This was done simply by his looking at the enemy. Let my mind be fixed upon that Krishna. Next, when Arjuna was seemingly polluted by ignorance upon observing the soldiers and commanders before him on the battlefield, the Lord eradicated his ignorance by delivering transcendental knowledge. May his lotus feet always remain the object of my attraction. You see, significantly, Bhishma is saying this continuously. If you look at the end line of every verse, may I not desire fruitive results, let my mind go, thus go unto Krishna. Let my mind be fixed upon that Krishna. May his lotus feet always remain the object of my attraction. It's very, very sweet and very, very nice. And even at the end, Bhishma, the essence of his prayers is he's very fervently praying that please let my mind not deviate from this image of Krishna, from Krishna's meditation upon Krishna. We see the next verse, which is a famous incident, fulfilling my desire. Fulfilling my desire and sacrificing his own promise, he got down from the chariot, took up his wheel, and ran towards me hurriedly, just as a lion goes to kill an elephant. He even dropped his outer garment on the way, and famously there's a painting of this in the Bhagavatam. In the Mahabharata, there's a slightly different account narrated exactly what he took up, but regardless, Krishna took up some weapon even though he had taken a vow not to do so, not to participate in the battle of Kurukshetra, and specifically taking up weapons. But he did so with the intention to kill Bhishma Dev. It said here like an elephant. Just as a lion goes to kill an elephant. Because he wanted to protect his dear devotee Arjuna. Bhishma Dev, he understood the background to this within the Mahabharata. Arjuna was practically terrorizing the army of the Kurus, and Bhishma was very afraid that his army will be annihilated, more or less. But you can understand if Arjuna is killed or Arjuna is attacked, then the pressure will be relieved from the army. So specifically, he was making an effort to specifically kill or fight Arjuna, specifically kill him, because that would be a great asset for his army. So this incident came about. And we see that Krishna preventing this, to protect his devotee, Krishna broke his own vow and took up arms on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. I'll skip some verses. And they're all very significant, but there's a couple significant more which I want to cover. Text 40 you can go to, interestingly enough. Let my mind be fixed upon upon Lord Sri Krishna, whose motions and smiles of love attracted the damsels of Rajadham, the gopis. The damsels imitated the characteristic movements of the Lord after his disappearance from the rasa dance. So he's remembering a very, very elevated pastime, actually. He's remembering very elevated devotees. He has information, Bhishma Dev himself, being a very elevated devotee, he has knowledge of Lord Krishna's pastimes out of Vrindavan. And not only that, he has knowledge how the gopis, it's pretty intimate knowledge actually for Bhishma Dev to understand such a thing. But this is why he is, for example, a Mahajana. He's aware of these things. So he's remembering even these things, Krishna's pastimes at the time of death. And then there's one specifically. So he says in the next verse, he's remembering all these incidents. Why? In order to keep my mind upon the Lord. And there's one very beautiful verse. I want to go back, actually. because there's one very poetic, beautiful verse. It's one of my favorite verses in the Bhagavatam. I had just seen it yesterday, actually. You can go to text 24, okay? Actually, you can go to text 23. Why not? We can read that too. Actually, you can go to text 22. Why not? It's all very beautiful, actually. As you see, Bhismādev, he says here, he sees Krishna has come before him. I mean, he's just seen Krishna like this. Well, Krishna has been there, actually, but he's saying that to the Pandavas that this Krishna, you don't understand that this Krishna who has acted as your family member and friend, actually he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he says here, yet despite his being equally kind to everyone, he has so graciously come before me while I am ending my life, for I am his unflinching servitor. Krishna personally came before Bhismādev when he was leaving his body. Krishna personally came and he gave him remembrance like that. How amazing Krishna's affection for his devotee. It's such a very sweet, despite it being a very gruesome scene, he's lying on a bed of arrows, bloodied, and he's about to die. At the same time, it's very sweet. Krishna has come there just to deliver his devotee. And he says, continuing, the personality of Godhead, the next verse, who appears in the mind of the devotee by attentive devotion and meditation and by chanting of the holy name, releases the devotee from the bondage of fruitive activities at the time of his quitting the material body. So this benediction that Bhismādev got isn't, or this mercy, we can better say, is not limited just to him. It's open to everybody. The personality of Godhead appears in the mind of the devotee by attentive devotion and meditation and by chanting of the holy name. So remembrance of the holy names, specifically at the time of death, is as good as Krishna himself coming before us like that. We see accounts of Srila Prabhupada leaving his body, specifically at the last moment, he uttered Hare Krishna, and then everything was finished. His disciples recount. So the same benediction was bestowed upon Srila Prabhupada. That same benediction, that same mercy can be bestowed upon us. It just takes serving the personality of God within his life, and attentive devotion specifically is mentioned here throughout this life, and we can attract the Supreme Personality of God's mercy. And then we can go to this next verse. This is my favorite verse, probably in the whole Bhagavatam, I'm not sure. May my Lord, who is four-handed, whose beautifully decorated lotus face, with eyes as red as the rising sun, is smiling, kindly await me at that moment when I quit this body. So it's very beautiful. He's even though Krishna is there, he's praying like this. That specifically this four-handed because this four-handed form of Krishna, Narayana, his worshipable deity was four-handed Narayana. So Bhismādev's his Ishtadev is Narayana. So he's thinking like this. That's his specific, that form of the Lord he's specifically attracted to. So this is his desire at the end of his life. It's so very beautiful, with his eyes as red as the rising sun. Recently, the sun has been rising, has been tinting the whole horizon. It's a very, very beautiful red. So Krishna's eyes are just like that. Specifically, Lord Narayan's eyes are like that. Then we can go again to Bhismādev's final prayer. You can go text number 42. And he says the same language. Now I can meditate with full concentration upon that one Lord, Sri Krishna, now present before me, because I have transcended the misconceptions of duality in regard to his presence in everyone's heart, even in the hearts of the mental speculators. He is in everyone's heart. The sun may be perceived differently, but the sun is one. So he's given this beautiful poetic prayer unto Krishna being like the sun, and then he's comparing him to the sun again later in his final prayer. And then he leaves his body. As said here in the next verses, he immersed himself in the Super Soul, Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, etc. like this. And then all became silent, like birds became silent at the end of days. And then at text 45, somehow I always remember this one, that thereafter, both men and demigods sounded drums in honor, and the honest royal order commenced demonstrations of honor and respect. And from the sky fell showers of flowers. So you can see that what a personality Bhismādev is. How glorious is his life, his character, his activity. Everything about his life is glorious. His birth is glorious. His life is glorious. His whole life is glorious. And at the end of it all, it's also glorious. is completely glorious. Both men and demigods sounded drums in honor. The demigods were assembled there. They were viewing Bhismadev leave his body, and they showered him with flowers. Such a glorious departure. So, yeah, I've taken up quite some time because I didn't intend to go through this, but so this is how Bhismadev left his body. It's very inspiring. It's a very nice section in the Bhagavatam. I very much like how Srila Prabhupada translates here, especially because he wrote these purports, and there's much detail in the language he uses here. And just within the detail is obviously there within the Bhagavatam originally. You see, as a Mahajana, he was on the level of Brahma, Narada, and Shiva. And as a Mahajana, he's showing how to leave his body. Perfectly so. Of course, we may not necessarily have the benediction to choose when to die, necessarily, unfortunately. But we should at least follow Bhismadev's example of living a glorious life and dying gloriously as well. Just like my spiritual master was giving one lecture recently, for a Vaishnava dying, sometimes his departure is sometimes called Vaishnava Vijay, the victory of the Vaishnava. So similarly too, we see there's so many different accounts. Just like Dhruva Maharaj in the Bhagavatam, we see him stepping on the head of death personified, to board what Srila Prabhupada calls a Vaikuntha airplane there. So a Vaishnava's death, or seeming death, is his victory, actually. And Bhismadev, he showed this. So, getting to today's verse, you can pull up again, because it's been some time, 373 again. I'll just read the translation to remind. Go down to, Boys are enthusiastic to play with other boys or with various diversions because they are encouraged by desire. But there is no possibility of such desire for the Lord because he is self-satisfied and detached from everything at all times. So, a few things. One thing is that Vidura is speaking here, and he's qualifying the question he asked. The question he asked was in the previous verse. O great Brahmana, you can go to this. O great Brahmana, since the Supreme Personality of God is the complete spiritual whole and is unchangeable, how is he connected with the material modes of nature and their activities? If this is his pastime, how do the activities of the unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the modes of nature? So he's qualifying his question. He's not, this verse today is a qualification of the question. It's just like sometimes we say, where did you go yesterday? You weren't present during Mangalarti. So it's a qualification to the question. So he's saying, boys are enthusiastic, material boys are enthusiastic to play with other boys, but there's no desire in the Lord. So what causes him to act? Why does he act if there's no desire to act? He doesn't particularly need to do so. He's self-satisfied and he's detached from everything at all times. Well, there is a verse, actually there's a purport. You can pull up, I'm sorry I'm having you pull up so much stuff, but it's 10:239. The demigods in their Garbhastuti, they pray in answer to this. They say, Nate bhavasya sabhavasya karanam vina vinodam patatarka yamahe bhavo narodhastitra apiya vidyaya krita yatas tvaya bhayasharyatmani. That, O Supreme Lord, you are not an ordinary living entity appearing in this material world as a result of fruitive activities. Therefore, your appearance or birth in this world has no other cause than your pleasure potency. Similarly, the living entities who are part of you have no cause for miseries like birth, death, and old age, except when these living entities are conducted by your external energy. So Srila Prabhupada has a long purport here. I don't know if I'll read it now because it's... I'll just quote from just a few sentences in the purport. Srila Prabhupada elaborates, just touching on the verse itself, which that when the Supreme Personality of God appears, or we can also say acts, because anything he does, there are no such causes involved. There's no cause, because when boys play with whatever they're doing, when boys play with other boys or get involved with various diversions, they're encouraged by some sort of desire, material desire in their heart. There's no such desire for Krishna. So why does he act? It's stated here, however, no such causes are involved. His descent and activities is an act of his pleasure potency. So Krishna's acting is only out of his is an act of his pleasure potency. In other words, he does so simply for his own pleasure. He's self-satisfied. He creates his own pleasure. His own pleasure is inherent within him. He does so not because he's so forced to do, rather he just wants to act in that way. Previously, way back half a year ago on Bhismāstami, I quoted from Queen Kunti's prayers, and she gives so many different reasons for the Lord's appearance. Those same reasons can be taken for why the Lord acts in general, because his appearance, in one sense, is something the Lord does. So, one conclusion from that, there's many different reasons. One conclusion from that is because he does so for his own pleasure, as his own sweet will. Another explanation is that he wants to please the devotees. In Gita, we have that he wants to annihilate the demons and please devotees. So his activities in this world can be viewed through those two lenses. Principally, more than annihilating demons, the Lord acts for the pleasure of the devotees. But philosophically, even more than that, he does so because he just wants to do so. It's just like we heard a few days ago in Srila Prabhupada's lecture. Somebody asked, why is Krishna blue? And he responded, why is the sky blue? The sky is blue, that's all. So similarly, too, why does Krishna act? There's no cause for him to act. He's self-satisfied. He doesn't have a desire to act necessarily. And he's detached from everything, nor is there a reason for him acting. Well, one thing is he just wants to act. He acts. That's as good as an explanation we can get. Elsewhere in Gita, we have Krishna himself further explaining why he acts. You can go to chapter 3, text 22. Actually, it comes in many places in Gita. It comes in the 4th chapter as well, but this is basically the same or more detailed. I'll just read the English. O son of Pritha, there's no work prescribed for me within all the 3 planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor do I have a need to obtain anything. And yet, I am engaged in prescribed duties. So Krishna, he himself says this. Why? He answers this in the next verse. For if I ever fail to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow in my path. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living entities. And I think somewhere here comes, as great men do, common men follow. Somewhere, I think later, I forget exactly where. So one explanation given by Krishna himself in the Gita is that why does he act? Well, Krishna does many different things. Sometimes he acts to bewilder demons. That's one such thing. But he also sets an example for society. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. All his acts aren't necessarily meant to set an example. For instance, dancing with the gopis is not meant to set an example for others to imitate. And Shukadeva Goswami, he makes that point clear. So some things, so Krishna is speaking like this, but some things he does to set an example for others. Other things he does just because he breaks that same principle he sets forward, and he does it just because he wants to, out of his own pleasure potency. Another point in this purport I wanted to touch on, or just briefly mention, mainly Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one. He expands himself by his energies in multi-forms of self-expansions and separated expansions as well, just as fire expands by heat and light. So, there's no other existence besides the Lord himself. It's very interesting. Everything is Krishna in one sense. The material world, in one sense, is Krishna. The jivas, in one sense, they're Krishna, but they're not Krishna at the same time. The material world is part of Krishna, but at the same time, it's not. It's just like Prabhupada is quoting here, this mayatitam idam sarvam, jagad avyakta murtina, but stani sarva bhutani, na chaham teshvavastitaha. Everything is an expansion of the Lord, and everything is situated in him, yet he's not them. It's very contradictory. It's achintya, actually, what we've been hearing, is inconceivable. The explanation is there in the Gita, but it's quite confusing. So everything is a manifestation of Krishna's opulence. The material world, even the jivas, we hear, Ekobahusyam, that the one became many. Krishna expanded himself. Why does Krishna expand himself? Srila Prabhupada, when once asked this question, Srila Prabhupada gave his own example, if I can remember it properly, he said, just like I am here and I have so many disciples. Why do I have so many disciples? For pleasure, so we can enjoy each other's association. So, similarly too, why does Krishna expand himself into so many living entities? Why does he expand himself as the material world? Well, material world may be a slightly different case, but specifically living entities, he does so to enjoy it. Because he wants to do so for the same reason, his own pleasure potency. He does not force to do so. Nobody's forcing him to do so. Nobody's forcing him even to create the material world, but he does so for his own pleasure. Then, that is the opulence of the Lord's attachment and detachment. He is attached to everything, yet he is detached from all. So Krishna has a hand in everything that's going on in this world. Yet at the same time, he's ever detached from it. There's nothing particularly, even if you look at it logically, there's nothing that quite makes sense for Krishna to be attached to in this world, because everything in this world is just a reflection of Krishna's opulence. It comes from him. At the same time, we see this world is a reflection of Krishna's potency, spiritual potency, and the jivas, in one sense, are manifestations of Krishna. But we see even Krishna, he's attracted by his own pleasure potency. We even see in the Bhagavatam, Krishna, he himself, he's attracted by his own reflection. For example, we hear of Krishna looking in either a mirror or a puddle, something like that, and him being attracted by it. So, yeah. So, that's quite simple. This verse is mainly just a clarification of the question he asked previously. Why does the Lord act? What impels him to even though he doesn't particularly have a desire like the boys of this world, why does he act? Just out of his own pleasure and potency. Nothing else. Nothing forces him to do so. So, okay, there's 4 minutes left until 8:30, but I'll end it there and take any comments or questions anybody has about Bhishma Dev or otherwise.
About the purport today.
Yes.
It said that since there is no existence besides the Lord himself, the Lord's association with anything manifests his association with himself. Could you explain that?
Yeah, everything is Krishna in one degree. Is just like the sun. The sun is there. All the light that's going throughout the universe is nothing but the sun. The sun is pervading all the universe. But the light is also different from the sun. But even conventionally, we say, to quote Prabhu, just like the sun is coming into this room, we say conventionally like that. And it is true, the sun is like there, but the sun is also like not there. At the same time, everything is the sun. So similarly too, in one sense, Krishna is everything. So his association with anything manifests his association with himself. So Krishna associating with his own energy or expansions, or everything is an expansion or energy of Krishna, a very simple explanation. And then when he associates with that, it's just him associating with himself in one degree. Of course, we have, for example, sometimes we hear jivas referred to as separated expansions. So the jivas are separated from Krishna. At the same time, they're not. Nevertheless, they're expansions. Srila Prabhupada will many times explain, you are like a minute Krishna. The jiva is like a minute Krishna. The same qualities that are there in the jiva, or rather, those qualities that are there in Krishna are there in the jiva, because the jiva is an expansion of Krishna. Now, it's different from an avatar, obviously, something like that, because they're separated, whereas avatar is amsha. Amsha, different things are there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, jiva is an expansion of Krishna. So to the material world, the same thing, even Maya, the Maya, Krishna Shakti itself, is an expansion of Krishna. So the association of Krishna with his energy is ultimately just association of Krishna with himself. It's just like the sun's ray. If you look at the sun's rays, you can, if you have some instrument or something, you can see how the sun's rays are emanating from the sun, and the sun's rays seem to be touching the sun. It's just the sun touching the sun. There's nothing more. You can divide it in one sense and say, well, it's the rays touching the sun. But another sense, it's the sun, just the sun touching the sun. Everything's the sun. So like that. That's how I would explain it.
So this point is just made to not view anything separated from the Supreme Lord.
Yeah, basically, just like the same verse I quoted Eko Bahusam, that the one became many, it's the same thing. So when the one then associates with the many, well, it's just, it's the same one, basically, because Om Purnama Daf Purnama, the one remains complete and whole. He doesn't lack in any regard. So, yeah, that's principally being, at least Srila Prabhupada, how he's going about his purport. He's stressing that unified nature of everything, like that. I mean, both aspects are there, but specifically that, yeah. So.
It's also my understanding about this desire is that for the conditioned soul, desire is there because there is something lacking. And
yeah.
so then there's something outside of this conditioned soul that the conditioned soul seems to be seeking. Whereas for the Supreme Lord, when he acts, it's not that he's seeking something outside which is not, which is different from him. And that he just expands and his enjoyment just keeps expanding. And so, yeah, I was kind of understanding this desire thing from that perspective also.
Yeah, that's a good point. I meant to mention that. Yeah, that's a good point. Krishna's not lacking anything. And the material world, boys play with other boys. Why? Well, because their minds disturb them. And they're also feeling the lack of such play, we can say. But Krishna doesn't feel the lack of such play. Nevertheless, he plays.
Yeah.
It's inconceivable, actually.
Inconceivable.
Yeah. Anything else?
I just wanted to, you mentioned, like Prabhupada said, why do I have all these disciples?
Yeah.
I've never heard this. Could you like repeat that and then like why?
Yeah, I'm paraphrasing it. It's there in the Muda mission. What is that? For enjoyment. Yeah. Why do I have all these disciples? For enjoyment. To enjoy. Yeah. I think he said that something like 1968, 1969. It's some like lecture or something like that. But he was given an example. He was regarding the same point. Why does Krishna expand? He himself gave this example. Why do I have disciples? To enjoy, so we can enjoy each other's association. It's just like a father has children. Why does he have children? To enjoy. Same thing, spiritual master. Why? At least there. There's different reasons as well. But like that.
So the disciples are expansions of the spiritual.
Yeah, in one sense, it's also like that. Of course, there's many other things with the guru-disciple relationship, but that's one aspect of it. The spiritual master, he enjoys, he genuinely likes his disciples' association. He likes to be around his disciples, and the disciples definitely like to be around the spiritual master. It's reciprocal. So, same thing with Krishna. Krishna likes to be around his expansions, and Krishna's expansions, because they're reflections of Krishna, because Krishna likes to be around his expansions also like to be around Krishna. So it's for enjoyment, ultimately. Once, Srila Prabhupada was asked, what is the goal of life? And he replied, to enjoy. So that's one, of course not materially, but in a spiritual sense like that. So it's unconventional, but yeah. Is it okay?
One thing I was thinking in relation to that kind of like unclear sentence not unclear, but at least kind of like, yeah, not our usual emphasis. Yeah,
he enjoys himself by his association?
Yeah, that the Lord's association with anything manifests his association with himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds kind of rhetorical in one sense.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it. Like feels like it's repeating, but it does make sense.
There's a verse in the first canto that describes how like a man, like a man's wife and home and this and that, the reason that he's able to enjoy them, or the reason that those things are dear to him, is because they're ultimately manifestation of his own dearness to himself. Ultimately, he himself is dear to himself, and therefore he values all these things in relation to him. But ultimately, it's founded upon like his ultimate like love for himself. So the same thing, it seems like the same thing applies to Krishna, that Krishna appreciates his Shaktis, or Krishna is able to enjoy with his Shaktis, just like it says here, the Lord's association with anything manifests his association with himself. You could say like the Lord's enjoyment with anything is a manifestation of his enjoyment with itself, and you can see that also like in conditioned souls.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense, yeah. Anything else? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Bhismāstami ki jai.